the rich California city of Temecula, which is dotted with golf courses and vineyards, Mayor Maryann Edwards has put into action a new plan to eliminate homelessness in her city. Now, she is quoted in saying that, quote, homeless people who are panhandling off the ramps are homeless by choice. They have rejected all forms of help and have instead chosen to play on the sympathy of generous residents. She also blames charitable people and said, quote, people will know that by giving food, money, or temporary housing to a homeless person, they are actually enabling that homeless person to continue to live in the creek and use heroin. However, in spite of this mayor's claims, according to a recent study, the vast majority, 94% of homeless people, say that they use the money that they receive from people primarily to buy food, and that less than a majority of them actually use any of that money for alcohol or drugs on a regular basis. The mayor's Responsible Compassion campaign, as it is called, is comprised of three main parts. The first part is allegedly about supplying more homeless services and temporary housing for the homeless. The second part of the plan is about increasing, quote, surveillance and inspections of areas typically occupied by homeless people or transients, with new ordinances also going into place outlawing things like panhandling. And finally, the third step is a public awareness campaign, which would be admonishing anyone who gives to the poor, claiming that they are perpetuating the homeless problem. Edwards doesn't want to actually spend any taxpayer dollars on implementing these plans for increased housing and services for the homeless, however. Instead, they are planning to rely entirely on volunteers and charitable organizations funded completely by private donations. Considering how rich a community this is, and considering that there are only an estimated 80 homeless individuals within city limits, it would be more than possible to eliminate homelessness in this city without actually criminalizing homelessness in the process. But when the mayor was asked if she collaborated with any homeless individuals in her plans for the future of the city, she said no, that she just used common sense. So what do you guys think? Is this actually going to help or hurt the homeless?
I don't know. I don't know how much it's gonna hurt the homeless. Like, I know, like, they're still gonna panhandle, right? And they're going to. I mean, they'll get ticketed and all that, but they will probably not pay the tickets. I'm like just keeping it real. They don't usually pay the tickets, and then they go to jail for a little while. Like, my friend's a cop, and he tells me, like, the first day of the month they write the tickets to the homeless people, and then the last day of the month they have to go pick them up and send them to jail for like 15 days because they didn't pay the ticket or whatever. So, like, I don't know if it's going to change a lot for them, but it seems it's very insensitive, obviously, what she's saying. And I understand certain parts of what she's saying, that it's better to give to organizations than to give to people on the street, right? In general, like there's like studies to back up that charities do a better job and all that. But, like, don't, like, the people who are giving to the homeless on the street, it comes from a good place. Like she's kind of talking down to the people who give to the homeless and to the homeless when she should be saying, look, give in a better way. Like, this way is proven more effective. Maybe you should give in that way. Like, try and convince people to do better instead of, like, just, like, calling everybody horrible people and saying that they're all just, cheating the system or whatever.
And for me, you're not going to hurt the homeless people more because there's not really, like, they're already homeless. They're already in one of the worst situations that you could find yourself in, other than being, of course, put in jail for being homeless, which
right, that could make the situation worse. That could make the situation worse.
There's not much more you can do to hurt homeless people other than just that. And so, I mean, as far as the huge impact, obviously it's not going to help the homeless people, and there's not much more that you can do to hurt them. Basically, as Sean says, they're still gonna try and panhandle, and people are still gonna try to help them because people are good people, and I definitely think that it's incredibly callous for that mayor to sit there and say that they're just going to sit there and go in the river and do heroin, and you're enabling that. How do you know? How do you know? For one, yes, there are some homeless people who will self-medicate because they're freaking homeless. What do you expect them to do, right? And they need help, and not to basically what she's doing is saying that's your problem. If you're homeless, that's your fault. I don't really care about you. Don't help these people. What would really be effective is if they were to shift a couple of tax dollars their way, and open up like an ad campaign of saying, if you really want to help these people around the area, maybe you should let's set up these charitable organizations and use some of our tax money as well to actually try to fix the problem instead of just saying no, don't feed the animals, because that's essentially what you're calling them.
And there's one thing I want to add is that some of these people, like, we've actually changed our laws to be less strict on panhandling over the years, because some of these
depends on where you are.
No, but the reason why is not out of kindness to the homeless. It's because some of the homeless are in such dire straits that when they get sent to jail, 3 square meals a day and walls around them, like, sometimes that's a better option for them. Like, like, it's a horrible option, but I'm just saying you're comparing 2 horrible situations. So we've actually changed laws against panhandling so they don't end up in jail, because that's a drain on the taxpayer. Why don't you, instead of creating a jail cell and paying all these security guards, maybe have a shelter that's not horrible? Like, homeless people are scared to death to go to shelters because they get their stuff stolen. If there's not enough beds, there's like all these restrictions. Maybe like try and work with a local shelter or something like that. But you're really going backwards to where you got now that the laws against panhandling got more lenient.
Right. I was just thinking that in this rich, very affluent community, I don't think it would take very much of their tax dollars or their private donations, take both of them combined, and all they'd have to do is make a relatively small, low-income apartment complex.
Are you
80 people. It's 80 people. If you have 80 people that are homeless in an entire city, I mean, you should consider yourself freaking lucky, and just take care of the situation, build a building, put 80 small, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments in there, and house these people and give them a place, a rock to stand on to lift themselves out of the muck.
But there's that mindset too that gets in the way of that. And for once again, the governor is perpetuating the fallacy that, they're all, they did this themselves. They rejected all the help. So, yes, because there's generous, copious amounts of help out there. No, there actually isn't. In some places there are, but not necessarily in this area. I don't know what kind of programs they offer in this area, but it seems like it just seems like they're blaming homeless people for being homeless. And that's really, once again, it's ridiculous.
And it depends on how you come at the situation, right? Because we've been over this before. Most people don't like to look at homeless people. Like, that's just a general thing in this country. We don't like to look at people who are in like that bad of a situation, right? Like, it sounds horrible. I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but like, that's the reality. So if she came at it and said, look, a lot of these people are rejecting help from shelters, which is true, right? A lot of homeless people don't want to go to shelters. Maybe I should look into what's going on at the shelter and try and make it more accommodating. Because if they're not going to use those services, then those services are actually going to waste. Like,
that's a very good point. Like, there are legitimate, like you said earlier, there are legitimate reasons for them not to want to go to the shelters. Some shelters, like we did a story about Tampa, Florida, some shelters actually charge up to $50 a night in order to allow someone to stay there. Yeah, you get things stolen from you, taken from you. There are fights, diseases, not enough beds, lice. It's just, they'd rather stay on the street. They don't consider themselves much better off in the shelter. So, especially if they have to pay, where are they going to get the money to pay for a shelter? If they could pay for a shelter, then they could pay for a hotel room.
Right, and that's true. Like a lot of people don't believe that some shelters out there actually charge you to stay there. We have a viewer, who used to comment a lot on our videos and watch our videos a lot, who was homeless, and so he would watch us on the phone, and he would send us you know basically updates on his job search. He's disabled and stuff, and he would tell me about some of the terrible conditions in some of these shelters and the very, very restrictive draconian rules for being in there. So the shelters aren't exactly the best places to stay. They're cramped. There's no privacy. Uh, you know, in this particular place, you would have to because you couldn't go downtown, you'd have to get bused somewhere else, and you have to be in by 8 o'clock and everything like that. So those shelters aren't exactly the greatest places to stay, and especially if you're being charged, man, it wouldn't surprise me to see that like some of these people would be like, I've been there, those places are terrible, I'd rather sleep out in my car.
Right.
And
All right.
and
Go
to
ahead.
pretend these people like aren't like even if they're not looking for a particular job, to pretend that their life isn't difficult. Like I see homeless people all the time. Every time you put out recyclables, they come and collect all of them to get a nickel per bottle. Like to pretend that these guys aren't trying to get some kind of money on their own, and that like we should restrict every means of money to kind of force them into places. Like that's crazy to me. Like I see that guy like taking my recyclables, and I think A, thank you because I'm a jerk, and B, I feel bad for him. So like I don't understand like the hatred for homeless people.
I know. Me neither. But it seems to be a growing trend in this country, criminalizing homelessness and what
Well,
homeless people have to do in
it's
order to.
blaming it's blaming the victim mentality once again, and it's also to get back to your point of like building an apartment complex, a low income in a very, very ritzy neighborhood. Don't you think that there, with the mindset there, that there'd be a huge backlash against that? Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that. You're going to lower my property values.
Of
Because
course.
that's the mindset of people like that, especially if it's in a very fancy area. So I think it's going to be one of those things where Sean is absolutely right. People don't want to look at homeless people, and they're just like, let's get them out of here. Let's figure out a way. Let's make them, as Mitt Romney said about immigrants. Let's make them self-deport. Let's make it
And
so bad for them they just want to leave.
and to be fair, criminalizing homelessness might work. Remember when we criminalized drug use and all the addicts disappeared?
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. That's what happened.